Everyone has a story. Some are about love, some are about betrayal, and some are about the moment a quiet person finally stopped being underestimated. Welcome to Vengeance Narratives, where revenge is intelligent, psychological, and unforgettable. If you've lived through betrayal, humiliation, deception, or silent heartbreak, share your story with us. Your experience could inspire the next gripping narrative, because the most dangerous stories are the true ones. Subscribe, like, and share. It will help our channel grow.
Silent Strings. Chapter 1. The Night She Called Me. And not because Senator Garrett Mills had started looking at Rebecca like he already owned her. Number I knew, because she stopped hiding her disappointment in me. That's the real beginning of betrayal, not secrecy. Confidence. Confidence that the person you are betraying no longer matters enough to fear. My name is Nathan Hale. At least, that's the name most people know. At 49 years old, I looked exactly like the kind of man ambitious women eventually outgrow. Quiet government consultant, moderate salary, conservative suits. A townhouse outside Alexandria. No flashy car, no country club membership, no political celebrity friends. Boring. That was Rebecca's favorite word for me near the end. Boring. The strange thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had spent years building a life designed to appear forgettable, because forgettable men survive. The fundraiser was held at the Willard Hotel in Washington. Crystal chandeliers. Donors wearing fake patriotism stitched into custom tuxedos. Wealthy people pretending they cared about the country while negotiating influence beside trays of imported champagne. I stood near the back of the ballroom holding a bourbon I never intended to drink, and I watched my wife fall in love with power. Rebecca looked beautiful that night. Navy silk dress, diamond earrings. Hair pinned up just enough to expose the elegant curve of her neck. Garrett Mills kept touching every chance he got. Not openly. Not enough for scandal. Just enough. That small possessive gesture powerful men use when they think something belongs to them already. She laughed at every story he told, leaned closer than necessary, touched his arm too often, and every time she did, Garrett glanced across the room toward me with the same expression. Pity. That was his mistake. Most men think another man's humiliation weakens him. In my experience, humiliation is often the exact moment a dangerous man becomes patient. I'd seen it happen in Beirut, in Prague, in Istanbul, men who looked defeated right before entire governments collapsed around them. Garrett Mills had no idea who I was. Neither did Rebecca. That was the tragedy. And eventually, the weapon. I remember the exact moment I realized the affair wasn't new. Rebecca was standing beside Garrett while donors gathered around him near the stage. Someone made a joke about campaign stress, and Garrett casually placed his hand against the small of her back. Not tentative, not exploratory, familiar, intimate, practiced. That touch told me everything. My wife did not flinch, did not even notice, because she was already accustomed to him touching her. I looked down at my untouched bourbon and smiled slightly to myself. Field confirmation, no emotion, just assessment. Old habits. Rebecca finally approached me around 10:30. You disappeared, she said. I was here the whole time. You could at least try to socialize. I did. I nodded at 3 senators and 1 hedge fund manager. That's exactly what I mean. I looked at her calmly. You seem happy tonight. I am. There was no guilt in her voice. That surprised me more than the affair. Rebecca had once been kind. Ambitious? Yes. Restless? Absolutely. But kind. Somewhere over the years, admiration replaced affection inside her. She stopped wanting love and started wanting elevation. Garrett Mills represented elevation. He was rising fast. Presidential whispers surrounded him already. Cable news adored him. Donors worshipped him. And Rebecca saw herself climbing beside him. She mistook proximity to power for becoming powerful. A common mistake. I spoke with Garrett about joining the national strategy team, she said. Did you? He thinks I am wasted where I am. I almost laughed at the wording wasted. People always reveal themselves through the metaphors they choose. And what do you think? I asked. I think, she hesitated. I think I am tired of shrinking my life. There it was again, disappointment. Not anger, not resentment. Embarrassment. I embarrassed her now, the quiet husband, The invisible husband, the consultant. Nobody remembered after conversations ended. You should do what makes you happy, I told her. That answer irritated her immediately. I could see it. Rebecca wanted resistance. Women leaving decent men often need the man to become ugly so they can avoid confronting their own ugliness. You don't care? She asked. I didn't say that. You never say much of anything anymore. That part was true, because I had spent most of my adult life learning silence. Silence keeps secrets alive. Silence keeps operations clean. Silence keeps people from asking questions they should never ask. But silence also creates distance, and distance is where affairs grow. By 11:30, the fundraiser ended. Garrett shook my hand before we left. Firm grip, confident smile, predator eyes. Nathan, he said warmly, you've got an extraordinary wife. I looked directly into his face. Yes, I replied, I know exactly what she is. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered in his expression. Not fear, instinct, some ancient part of the human brain recognizing danger before logic catches up. Then it vanished. He smiled again. Rebecca didn't notice. On the drive home, she stared out the passenger window while Washington slid past us in gold reflections and wet pavement. You could have tried harder tonight, she finally said. At what? At being part of things. I kept my eyes on the road. I thought I was. No, Nathan, you observe things. You never join them. That one landed because it was true. Observers survive longer. Participants become targets. But I understood something then that I should have understood years earlier. Rebecca no longer viewed my restraint as strength. She viewed it as weakness. The townhouse was quiet when we entered. Rebecca slipped off her heels near the stairs. Then she turned toward me with the expression people use before detonating a bomb they've rehearsed in their heads 100 times. I am leaving you. Direct, controlled, prepared. I nodded once. For Garrett, I said. Her eyes narrowed immediately. You already knew. I suspected. How long? Long enough. She looked almost disappointed. Again, no explosion, no shouting, no collapse. Just calm. You don't seem upset. I didn't say I wasn't. Well, you certainly don't seem heartbroken. I studied her face carefully. Beautiful, familiar, and suddenly, very far away. You already left emotionally months ago, I told her quietly. Tonight was just paperwork. That angered her. Good. You know what your problem is, Nathan? She snapped. You live like nothing matters. No ambition, no urgency, no vision. Garrett actually wants something out of life. I smiled faintly. That was the moment I truly understood how little my wife knew about me, because ambition had defined my entire existence. I simply learned long ago that real power moves quietly. Garrett Mills needed cameras. Men like me needed encryption. Rebecca crossed her arms. I spent 16 years trying to convince myself your boring little consulting life was enough. There it was. The word, boring. It echoed strangely in the room. I wondered if she had practiced saying it. Probably. People rehearse cruelty when they need to justify themselves. You think Garrett is exciting? I asked. He's alive. And I am not? You hide from the world. No, Rebecca, I thought silently. I protected you from it, but she would never understand that, because I had spent 16 years making sure she never saw the monsters I dealt with, never saw the blood behind diplomacy, never saw the governments held together with bribery, threats, and leverage, never saw the classified side of history. She thought I wrote reports. In reality, entire administrations once waited for my assessments before moving military assets, but that life required compartmentalization. And compartmentalization eventually destroys intimacy. You become a collection of locked rooms even in marriage. Especially in marriage. Rebecca walked upstairs and returned with a leather suitcase. I am staying at the Hay, Adams for now. With Garrett. That's none of your business. I nodded slowly. You love him, she hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I love what my life can become with him, she answered. Honest, brutal, but honest. I respected honesty even when it cut deep. She packed quickly. Designer dresses, jewelry, shoes, cosmetics. She left behind photographs, books, old memories. That fascinated me more than anything. People unconsciously reveal what they value during departures. Rebecca packed for status, not sentiment. When she finished, she stood near the doorway holding the suitcase. "Aren't you going to fight for me?" That question almost broke my heart, because beneath all her ambition, beneath the affair and betrayal and vanity, some small part of her still wanted proof she mattered enough to destroy me. And maybe she did, just not in the way she expected. "You already made your decision," I said softly. "That's it?" I looked directly at her. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life." She laughed bitterly. "No, Nathan. Staying with you was the mistake." Then she left front door. Engine outside, silence. I stood alone in the hallway for a very long time. Not angry. Not yet. Just empty. People think revenge begins with hatred. It doesn't. Real revenge begins with grief. Grief sharpens into clarity, and clarity becomes strategy. At 12:46 p.m. I walked into my study downstairs. To Rebecca, it was a dull little office filled with policy books and outdated government hardware. She never knew about the hidden room behind the shelves, never asked enough questions. That saved her for a while. I pressed the concealed latch beneath an old copy of the Federalist Papers. The bookcase unlocked silently. Beyond it sat the part of my life I promised myself I would never touch again. 3 encrypted terminals. Signal isolation walls. Secure communication systems. Dead, drop servers. Operational archives. Ghosts. I entered the room and locked the door behind me. Then, I sat down slowly in the chair facing the monitors. For several seconds, I simply stared into darkness. Here is a moment former operatives understand better than most people. The moment you decide whether to stay dead. Nathan Hale, the quiet consultant, had been my cover for years. But another man existed underneath. A man governments once used when problems needed solving without fingerprints. A man who built financial infrastructure across 3 continents using shell entities, reconstruction contracts, and intelligence leverage so complex even accountants couldn't fully trace it. Rebecca called me boring because she mistook silence for insignificance. That misunderstanding was about to ruin lives. I inserted the authentication key into the terminal. The screen illuminated instantly. Identity token required. I typed 12 characters from memory. Voice confirmation required. I leaned toward the microphone. Winter glass, 7 candles. No moon. The system paused. Then the screen displayed 3 words. "Welcome back, Nathaniel." No one had called me that in years. Nathaniel Cross. Operational identity, officially deceased. Unofficially wealthy beyond Garrett Mills' imagination. I opened a new encrypted file. Case designation, Mills Fay Rebecca, Hale Fay ethics exposure. Then I stopped. Number 2, emotional. Emotion cloud structure. I deleted it. Started again. Mills Fay accountability. Better, cleaner. I began mapping everything I already knew. Garrett's campaign financing. Rebecca's access points. Political donor overlaps. Consulting shells. Foreign influence vulnerabilities. Offshore transfers. And within 23 minutes, I found the first crack. A Cayman routing channel connected to donor infrastructure Garrett publicly denied existed. Sloppy, very sloppy. I leaned back slowly in my chair, then I smiled for the first time all night. Not because I enjoyed what came next, because I finally understood something important. Garrett Mills thought he stole another man's wife. Rebecca Hale thought she escaped a boring husband. Neither of them understood they had just stepped into an intelligence operation run by the quietest man in the room. And I had not even started yet. Chapter 2. Ghost Accounts. I did not sleep after Rebecca left. Not because I was emotionally shattered, not because I spent the night staring into the dark replaying memories of my marriage, and not because I couldn't accept what had happened. I stayed awake because patterns were already emerging. That's the curse of men like me. We don't experience betrayal emotionally at first. We experience it structurally. Connections, timelines, behavioral shifts, access points, weaknesses. Most people hear devastating news and collapse inward. I build maps. At 2:13 a.m. I finished the first network trace on Garrett Mills' donor structure. At 2:47 a.m., I identified 2 intermediary LLCs routing influence money through a Virginia consulting group connected indirectly to Rebecca's legislative office. At 36 a.m., I confirmed something much more interesting. Garrett's campaign machine wasn't merely corrupt, it was dependent. Dependent systems are fragile systems, and fragile systems break beautifully. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes briefly. The hidden room hummed softly around me, secure processors, shielded drives, ghost architecture from another life. Rebecca had lived 20 feet above this room for 11 years. She never knew it existed. That wasn't an accident. Compartmentalization had kept her safe, but compartmentalization destroys intimacy in slow, invisible ways. Eventually, the secrets become walls. Then the walls become identity. She once asked me why I never talked about my work. I told her government consulting was mostly boring meetings. Technically true. The boring meetings just happened after operations involving arms brokers, sanctioned banks, insurgent financing networks, and foreign intelligence cutouts. People imagine covert work as glamorous. It isn't. Mostly, it's patience. Patience and leverage. The men who survive longest are never the loudest men in the room. They're the ones everybody forgets are there. At 3:22 a.m., I activated my first external contact in nearly 6 years. Not through a phone. Never through a phone. I opened an old relay node routed through Talon, then bounced the signal twice through Singapore before establishing a secure blind handshake. The terminal displayed a single blinking cursor. No names, no greetings. I typed. Active. The response came 43 seconds later, for you always. I allowed myself a small breath. Elias Mercer. Former Signals Intelligence Specialist, Financial Systems Architect. One of the few people alive who knew both who I was and what I had built after leaving the field. He also owed me his daughter's life. That creates durable loyalty. I typed again. Need passive monitoring. No active interference yet. Response? Target. I entered. Senator Garrett Mills. Associated Networks. Priority. Level 2. Pause. Then, political. You hate political. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. This one became personal. No response for nearly a minute. Then understood. That single word carried years inside it. Men like Elias understood the danger of personal motives. Emotional operations create sloppy decisions, but they also create relentless ones. I transferred several encrypted identifiers and donor shell references. Seconds later, "Oh, this is bad." I smiled faintly. "You have no idea," I muttered aloud. The dawn light began creeping across the edges of the hidden room around 5:30. I stood slowly, feeling stiffness settle into my back. Age catches operatives differently. Not softer, sharper. Every injury remembers the weather. I climbed upstairs quietly. The house felt strange already. Not emptier, incorrect. Like furniture arranged slightly wrong after a break. Rebecca's perfume still lingered faintly near the stairs. I made coffee, black, no sugar. Then I sat alone at the kitchen table and stared at the ceramic bowl holding her abandoned earrings. 16 years. Do you know what the cruelest part of betrayal is? It isn't the affair. It isn't the lies. It's realizing the person who hurt you stopped seeing your humanity long before they left. Rebecca didn't think she was destroying me. She thought she was escaping mediocrity. That hurt more than the infidelity, because once upon a time she knew exactly who I was without needing details. Before ambition poisoned her. Before Washington transformed admiration into addiction. Before she began measuring human value by proximity to cameras. At 7:14 a.m., my phone buzzed for the first time. Rebecca. Not a call, a text. I'll come for the rest of my things later this week. No apology, no hesitation. Administrative. Like canceling a dentist appointment. I looked at the message for several seconds before setting the phone face down on the table. Then another message arrived. Please don't make this ugly. I actually laughed at that. Not loudly, not bitterly. Just genuine amusement. Rebecca still believed ugliness was something waiting in the future. She had no idea ugliness already existed around Garrett Mills like oxygen. The only difference now was that I intended to expose it. I didn't reply. Silence is often more destabilizing than anger. By 9:30, I was showered, dressed, and sitting in a secure conference room 3 blocks from DuPont Circle, pretending to be exactly what the government believed I was, a senior geopolitical consultant specializing in infrastructure stabilization and foreign risk assessment, which, again, wasn't entirely false. My meeting involved 3 mid-level officials discussing Eastern European energy volatility. I answered questions calmly, presented projections, explained probable market responses to pipeline disruptions, and the entire time, part of my brain quietly mapped Garrett Mills' destruction. That's another thing people misunderstand about revenge. The best revenge rarely interrupts routine. If your enemies can detect emotional instability, they begin preparing defenses. So I remained Nathan Hale. Polite? Measured? Forgettable. At 11:02 a.m., my assistant entered the conference room during a break. "Your wife called twice," she said carefully. Interesting wording, not Rebecca. Your wife, meaning something in Rebecca's tone had already shifted. What did she want? She didn't say. I nodded once. Anything else? She hesitated. There are reporters downstairs covering the Mills donor breakfast. Security is getting crowded. Of course there were. Garrett loved visibility. Visibility creates blind spots. After the meeting ended, I exited through the lower garage instead of the lobby. Old habits. The black sedan waiting beside the curb wasn't government-issued, too polished, too expensive. The rear passenger window lowered slowly. Rebecca sat inside wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. Get in, she said. I almost declined. Then I realized curiosity outweighed irritation. I entered the car. The driver closed the partition immediately. Professional. Not smart enough to matter, but professional. Rebecca removed her sunglasses and looked at me carefully. You didn't answer my texts. You left me 12 hours ago. That's not fair. I turned toward her slowly. Interesting choice of words. She sighed sharply. Garrett thinks we should keep things civil. I nearly smiled again. Garrett already managing optics. Good. Fear always enters ambitious men through reputation first. And what do you think? I asked. I think. Maybe we handled this badly. No, I said calmly. You handled this exactly how you wanted. That stung her. Good. Nathan, listen to me carefully, she said. Garrett's entering a very sensitive phase politically. If this turns messy? Yes. You mean public. She crossed her arms immediately. See, this is what I mean. That passive, aggressive tone. I am trying to understand the rules. There are no rules. There are always rules. The car stopped at a traffic light. Rebecca looked exhausted suddenly. Not guilty. Stressed. T here is a difference. I did love you, she said quietly. Did, past tense. Funny how one small word can feel like a bullet entering flesh. I looked out the window for several seconds before answering. I know. Then why are you acting like this? Like what? Cold. That almost made me laugh. Cold. Rebecca thought I was being cold because she had never seen actual coldness. Actual coldness is watching villages burn and still finishing your report, because emotion doesn't alter facts. Actual coldness is hearing a man beg for his family while knowing the information in his laptop matters more than his future. Actual coldness is burying pieces of yourself so deeply that normal people mistake the absence for calmness. Compared to that, this was heartbreak. Human heartbreak. And strangely enough, heartbreak hurt more. I am trying to protect your dignity, I told her quietly. My dignity. Yes. She stared at me in disbelief. You really think you are protecting me right now? I met her eyes calmly. Yes. That unsettled her. I could see it, because for one tiny moment, Rebecca remembered something she had spent years ignoring. I almost never lied to her. The car reached the Hay, Adams Hotel. She opened the door but paused before exiting. Tea here is something else. Go ahead. Garrett wants to meet with you. There it was. I kept my face neutral. Why? To clear the air. Number, he's trying to be respectful. No, Rebecca, he's trying to assess risk. Silence. Tiny shift in her pupils. Confirmation. Interesting. You are overthinking this, she said finally. That has kept me alive. Before she could answer, I stepped out of the vehicle and shut the door. The sedan pulled away immediately. I stood on the sidewalk watching it disappear into traffic. Then I reached into my coat pocket and activated the passive tracker I'd attached beneath the chassis when entering the car. Not because I needed Rebecca followed. Because I wanted Garrett's movement patterns. Always widen the map. Never focus solely on emotion. By noon, I was back in the hidden room. 3 new encrypted reports waited for me. Elias worked fast, very fast. I opened the first file and immediately understood Garrett Mills was even dirtier than I initially suspected. Campaign funds routed through shell nonprofits, foreign adjacent influence networks, luxury travel buried under consulting invoices, and one especially dangerous line item tied indirectly to a sovereign investment authority operating through intermediaries in Abu Dhabi. My eyes narrowed slightly. That wasn't ordinary corruption. That was vulnerability. The second file focused on Rebecca. I almost didn't open it. That surprised me. For years, I had analyzed hostile networks without hesitation, but seeing my wife reduced to behavioral timelines and financial associations suddenly felt invasive in a way intelligence work never had before. Still, I opened the file. Travel overlap with Garrett. 11 confirmed incidents. Private dinners hidden through campaign reimbursements. 17. Encrypted messaging platform installation. 8 months earlier. Initial emotional involvement likely began approximately 14 months ago. 14 months. I sat back slowly in my chair. 14 months. That meant Prague had already become a lie. Christmas had already become a lie. Our anniversary dinner by the harbor had already become a lie, all while she smiled across tables and asked if I wanted dessert. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. Not rage, grief, and beneath grief. Clarity. The final file from Elias contained only one sentence. You funded this man's entire ascent. I stared at the words for a long time. Because he was right. Garrett Mills didn't know it, but nearly 40% of the dark money ecosystem elevating his national profile ultimately traced back to infrastructure I quietly controlled, not directly, never directly, but through cascading influence architecture, so layered it became effectively invisible. Years ago, I built political funding channels as contingency assets, pressure systems, access systems, emergency stabilization systems. Garrett rose because my networks allowed him to rise, and Rebecca left me for him because my influence made him appear unstoppable. The irony was almost unbearable. I stood and walked toward the far wall of the hidden room, where a locked steel cabinet sat behind biometric security. Inside were sealed operational archives. I opened the cabinet slowly. Folders, passports, encrypted drives, dead identities, and one black leather dossier marked automatic enforcement protocols, domestic. I hadn't opened it in over a decade. Rebecca signed those agreements years ago during a classified containment incident in Vienna after accidentally witnessing something she was never cleared to. No. At the time, she barely understood what she signed, but I remembered every line, including the forfeiture clauses, including the ethics triggers, including the exposure provisions tied to compromised foreign adjacent political relationships. My pulse slowed. That always happened before operations. Everything inside me became quieter, sharper, more focused. I opened the dossier, and for the first time since Rebecca walked out of our house, I began planning the actual destruction. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Collapse. T here is a specific moment when revenge stops being fantasy and becomes operational reality. For most people, that moment is emotional. For me, it arrived as a spreadsheet, 3 days after Rebecca left. I sat alone in the hidden room staring at overlapping financial structures projected across my monitors while rain hammered softly against the townhouse. Windows upstairs. Campaign entities, consulting firms, shadow packs, foreign, linked investment corridors, luxury real estate holdings, media retainers. Everything Garrett Mills had built rested on leverage masquerading as momentum. And leverage, by its nature, only works while nobody pulls too hard. I was preparing to pull very hard. The interesting thing about powerful men is how repetitive they become. The public imagines corruption as genius, level sophistication. It rarely is. Most corruption operates through vanity. A politician wants admiration. A donor wants access. A lobbyist wants influence. A spouse wants status. Everyone tells themselves a flattering story while money quietly changes direction underneath them. Garrett's structure wasn't unique. What made it dangerous was scale. He was moving too fast. National media appearances. Exploratory presidential polling closed. Donor summits. Foreign policy positioning. He wanted the presidency eventually. Men who want the presidency begin believing ordinary rules no longer apply to them. That belief makes them careless. And careless men create trails. I zoomed in on a Cayman, linked holding company tied indirectly to a strategic energy consortium Garrett publicly claimed no association with. The routing path twisted through 4 intermediaries before touching a Virginia-based policy institute Rebecca had personally advocated expanding 6 months earlier. That made me pause, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed something painful. Rebecca hadn't merely fallen in love with Garrett. She had participated, knowingly or unknowingly, remained unclear. But participation changes things. Affairs can be emotional weakness. Conspiracies require choices. I leaned back slowly in my chair and rubbed my eyes. The hidden room smelled faintly of coffee and electronics. Outside, thunder rolled over Washington like distant artillery. There are sounds that never leave former operatives' thunder. Helicopter blades, encrypted notification tones, a woman crying quietly in another room. Those sounds remain lodged inside your nervous system forever. At 8:17 a.m. Elias sent another secure transmission. Noise in the network. Someone is asking about you. Interesting. I typed back immediately. Specific response came seconds later. Mills security consultant. Former FBI running light background. I smiled faintly. Garrett was nervous already. Good. Fear creates acceleration. Acceleration creates mistakes. I typed. Let him find boring. Elias replied with a single word. Cruel. Maybe, but effective. I spent the next 4 hours carefully feeding false visibility trails into several searchable systems connected to my public consulting identity. Infrastructure reviews, boring procurement audits, academic energy reports, government subcontract analysis, paperwork. Garrett's people would find exactly what Rebecca believed existed. Nathan Hale, forgettable consultant, low threat profile, emotionally wounded husband, no political reach, no meaningful financial footprint, nothing dangerous. The greatest advantage in any operation is controlling your enemy's confidence level, and Garrett Mills was becoming very confident. At noon, I received my first direct call from him. I stared at the phone vibrating on my desk for nearly 10 seconds before answering. Nathan Hale, Senator Garrett Mills. His voice sounded warm, controlled, professional. Men like Garrett spend years training their voices to sound trustworthy. I appreciate you taking the call, he said. I almost didn't. A soft chuckle. I imagine this situation is difficult. There it was. The politician Caden's sympathy wrapped around strategic positioning. Yes, I said calmly. I imagine you do. Pause, he adjusted immediately. I wanted to speak man, to. Man, no, I replied. You wanted to evaluate risk. Silence. Small silence. Meaningful silence. Then another controlled laugh. Rebecca said, you were intelligent. Interesting phrasing again. We're intelligent. As though my usefulness belonged to the past. I am trying to avoid unnecessary hostility, he continued. That's wise. I care about Rebecca. You care about acquisition. The line went quiet for almost 3 seconds. Another confirmation. Garrett finally lowered the performance slightly. You know, he said softly, men sometimes grow apart from their wives, and sometimes senators sleep with married staffers while routing donor money through shell organizations. Complete silence. Perfect silence. Then, I am not sure what you mean. Lie. Instant lie. I could hear the change in his breathing. Tiny, controlled, but present. That's the thing about interrogation training. You stop listening to words after a while. You listen to rhythm. I think you do, I said calmly. Nathan, if this is about emotional retaliation, don't insult me. Another pause. Then something shifted in his tone. Not fear yet. Assessment. Rebecca underestimated you, he said. Yes, I answered quietly. She did. He recovered quickly. Whatever you think you know, threatening a sitting senator would be a catastrophic mistake. I almost smiled. There it was. Power always reaches for intimidation once charm weakens. I am not threatening you, I told him. Good. I am studying you. That landed harder, because truth always lands harder. You are upset, Garrett said carefully. Number, I am disappointed? In Rebecca? No, I said softly. In your discipline. Silence again, then he spoke very slowly. What exactly do you want? Finally, the real question. Not moral outrage, not defense. Terms. I want nothing, I replied, which should terrify you. And then I hung up. I sat motionless afterward, staring at the dark phone screen. Garrett Mills was officially unstable now. Good. A frightened politician becomes a loud politician, and loud politicians attract scrutiny. At 2:30 p.m., Rebecca appeared at the townhouse unannounced. I watched her through the exterior cameras before opening the door. She looked exhausted, not physically, psychologically. Washington pressure ages people fast. Nathan, she said immediately. What did you say to Garrett? Hello mostly. This isn't funny. Number, it isn't. She stepped inside without invitation and removed her sunglasses with trembling fingers. That got my attention. Rebecca rarely trembled. He thinks you are digging into campaign finances. I am. Her face drained instantly, so she knew enough to fear specifics. Interesting. You can't do that, she whispered. Why? Because people will get hurt. There it is. What? The truth. She stared at me blankly. You never cared about hurting me, I continued calmly. You care about collateral damage. That's not fair. Fairness ended when you climbed into another man's bed while using my last name. The words hit her hard. Good. For the first time since leaving, Rebecca looked genuinely ashamed, but shame is not the same thing as accountability. Nathan, listen to me carefully. I folded my hands calmly. I am listening. You don't understand the people around Garrett. Number, she was wrong. I understood them perfectly because I helped build some of them. There are donors involved, she continued. International relationships, intelligence, adjacent contractors. If something explodes publicly, I interrupted quietly. Did Garrett tell you to say this? Silence then? He's trying to protect everyone. No, I said softly. He's trying to identify what I know. Her eyes widened slightly. There it was again, that flicker. That moment Rebecca remembered I was not stupid. Maybe for the first time in years, she was seeing me clearly too late. You are scaring me, she admitted. The honesty surprised me. Good. Fear opens people. You should be scared, I replied. Tears gathered in her eyes suddenly. I didn't think you'd become this person. That almost made me laugh. Become. Rebecca still believed this was transformation. Number, this was revelation. I've always been this person. No, she whispered. You were kind. That hurt more than the affair because she was right. I had been kind with her, gentle, patient, protective, and somehow she mistook kindness for weakness. I walked toward the kitchen slowly and poured myself coffee while she stood frozen in the living room. You know the funny thing, I said quietly. What? You still think Garrett is the powerful man in this story. She looked confused, then defensive. He is powerful. Yes, I agreed. But power borrowed from systems is fragile. What does that even mean? It means Garrett Mills has spent his entire life depending on visibility, approval, and influence networks built by other people. I turned toward her, slowly. I built mine differently. Something moved across her face then, a memory, a realization trying desperately to form. How much money do you actually have? She asked suddenly. Interesting. Not. What are you doing? Not. Who are you? Money. Even now, I smiled sadly. You never asked before. Because you acted like we were middle class. We were comfortable. You know what I mean. Yes, I said quietly. I do. She looked around the townhouse differently suddenly, not sentimentally, strategically, reevaluating. Women married to quiet men sometimes experience a horrifying moment after betrayal. The moment they realize they misunderstood the hierarchy entirely. You are hiding something, she whispered. I looked directly into her eyes. I hid many things from you. What are you? That question lingered between us. What was I? Former operative, consultant, architect, ghost, husband, monster? I was someone dangerous long before you met me, I answered calmly. Rebecca stepped backward slightly. Actual fear now, not emotional fear, instinctive fear. Good. The room fell silent. Then my secure phone vibrated once in my pocket, priority signal. I checked the message and immediately understood the operation had accelerated faster than expected. Elias had sent a live media alert. Federal ethics inquiry leak imminent. Source unknown, Mills camp, panicking. Interesting, very interesting. I had not triggered the leak yet, which meant somebody else inside Garrett's network was already nervous enough to start leaking independently. Systems under pressure always begin eating themselves. I looked up slowly. Rebecca was watching my face carefully. What happened? I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The beginning, I said quietly. At 6:40 a.m. p.m. Garrett Mills appeared on national television smiling beside an American flag while denying rumors of campaign finance irregularities. Too early. Much too early. That told me everything. Innocent men deny accusations through attorneys. Guilty men rush to cameras. I watched the interview from the hidden room while building the next phase of the collapse. Then the anchor asked Garrett a simple question. Senator, is there any truth to allegations involving inappropriate relationships with campaign-connected personnel? Tiny pause, microscopic, but I saw it. Garrett smiled. Absolutely not. Lie, clean lie, confident lie, public lie. Perfect. Because once a politician lies on record, destruction becomes easier. You no longer merely expose wrongdoing. You expose provable deception. I muted the television slowly, then opened the black dossier from Vienna again. Rebecca's signature waited near the bottom of page 14. I remembered the night she signed it. She was frightened, confused. She trusted me completely back then. Is this serious? She asked me in that Vienna hotel room years ago. Yes? Are we in danger? Not if you trust me. She signed without reading carefully, because she loved me then, or believed she did. Now that signature was connected to classified disclosure protocols, financial forfeiture contingencies, and ethics exposure clauses she never fully understood. I stared at her name for a long time. Rebecca Hale. Soon to become Rebecca Mills if Garrett had his way. Except Garrett Mills didn't understand something critical. You cannot build a future safely atop buried intelligence architecture. Eventually, the dead wires become live again, and when they do, everything burns. Chapter 4. Near Discovery. The first real danger arrived on a Thursday night. Not from Garrett. Not from Rebecca. From a man named Daniel Voss, former FBI counterintelligence, private security consultant, currently employed by Garrett Mills' campaign as an independent political risk advisor, which, translated into honest language, meant find threats before they become scandals. Most men in Daniel Voss's profession were glorified background check specialists pretending to be intelligence professionals because they once carried federal credentials. Voss was different. That made him dangerous. I first saw his name at 11:14 a.m. p.m. buried inside a metadata scrape Elias forwarded from a compromised campaign server. Voss requesting historical trace expansion on Nathan Hale. Beneath that, Florida Ag discrepancy. Pre-2011 record gaps. I sat very still after reading it. That mattered. Most people never notice missing years inside bureaucratic systems. Government databases are chaotic by nature. Inconsistencies disappear under volume. But Voss noticed, and once intelligent people notice absence, they begin asking why something was removed. I opened a secondary monitor immediately and pulled up my old containment architecture. Nathan Hale's civilian identity had been built carefully after 2011. Tax records, consulting contracts, property ownership, medical histories, travel patterns, everything aligned, except for one unavoidable fracture. Nathan Hale appeared in the world too cleanly, too neatly, too completely. And Daniel Voss had just smelled it. Rain fell softly outside the townhouse, while I reviewed exposure vulnerabilities line by line. No panic. Never panic. Panic narrows thinking. But for the first time since Rebecca left, I felt genuine operational concern. If Voss dug deeply enough, he might eventually uncover fragments connected to Nathaniel Cross. And if Nathaniel Cross resurfaced publicly, several governments would become extremely uncomfortable. Not because I had committed crimes, because I knew where certain financial skeletons were buried. At 11:42 p.m., I activated Elias again. Voss is competent. Response came immediately. I know. He asked about Budapest. That stopped me cold. Budapest. Nobody should have reached Budapest. That operation existed inside a compartment so restricted most agencies denied it internally. I typed carefully. How? Pause. Then, old Treasury contact. He doesn't know what he's looking at yet. Yet. That word mattered. I stood and walked slowly across the hidden room. Thunder rolled overhead. My reflection moved faintly across the dark monitor screens. Older now, grayer. Tired in ways sleep never fixed. Rebecca once told me I looked lonely even in crowded rooms. She wasn't wrong. Men who live behind constructed identities eventually become ghosts to themselves. The danger with ghosts is that sometimes people start digging up graves. I typed again. Containment options. Elias took longer this time. Finally, none clean. If he pulls threads hard enough, somebody will notice. I stared at the words, then typed the thing I had hoped never to say again. Prepare Phoenix. No response for almost a full minute. Then, Jesus Christ. Nathan, Phoenix Protocol. Last resort identity severance. Burn assets. Collapse visibility trails. Erase connective architecture, disappear. I had built the protocol years ago after Belgrade. After I realized governments protect assets only until protecting them becomes inconvenient. If Phoenix activated, Nathan Hale effectively died. Again, I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. And certainly not because my wife decided a senator's smile looked more exciting than my silence. At midnight, I shut down the terminals and walked upstairs. The townhouse felt suffocating tonight. Too many memories. Rebecca's coffee mug still sat beside the sink, a scarf draped over the chair, tiny domestic ghosts everywhere. I poured whiskey this time, real whiskey, not the untouched prop from the fundraiser. I drank standing in darkness near the kitchen window while Washington rain streaked the glass, and for the first time since all this began, I allowed myself anger, not explosive anger. Worse, focused anger. Rebecca had not merely betrayed me emotionally, she had destabilized containment. People outside intelligence circles never understand this. Certain lives are built like pressure vessels. You maintain routines, patterns, structures, silence, because the moment pressure shifts unexpectedly, hidden systems begin moving. Rebecca thought she was leaving a marriage. In reality, she had kicked open sealed doors connected to financial networks, operational histories, foreign leverage channels, and men who survived by remaining invisible. And now Daniel Voss was pulling threads. At 7:18 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. Rebecca. I considered ignoring it, then answered. Nathan. Her voice sounded strained. Garrett security people are asking questions about you. Smart of them. This isn't funny. Number it really isn't. Silence. Then quietly, what are you? Interesting. Again, not. What are you doing? What are you? Rebecca's instincts were catching up. I am your husband. No, she whispered. That's not enough anymore. I closed my eyes briefly. Once upon a time, it had been enough. You should distance yourself from Garrett, I told her calmly. He says you are bluffing. I smiled faintly. Of course he does. Nathan, if T here is something happening, tell me now. I almost did. That's the tragedy. Even after everything, part of me still wanted to protect her. I wanted to tell her to leave Washington immediately, leave Garrett, disappear quietly, take enough money to rebuild somewhere else. But protection without accountability becomes permission, and Rebecca had crossed too many lines already. Did Garrett tell you about the Cayman transfers? I asked. Silence. Long silence. That answered the question. She knew. Maybe not fully, but enough. Oh God, she whispered. There it was. The moment, the first real crack in her certainty. What did he involve you in, Rebecca? I didn't know. Don't lie to me. Her breathing trembled. I thought it was campaign structuring. It was laundering influence. I didn't know. No, I said softly. You just didn't ask. People rarely want truth badly enough to investigate benefits. That's how corruption survives. Rebecca's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Garrett says powerful donors protect everyone involved. I looked out the rain-covered window. That sentence alone proves he's doomed. At noon, Daniel Voss made his move. I was leaving a policy briefing near Georgetown when I noticed him across the street pretending not to watch me. Tall, athletic, military posture disguised beneath civilian clothing, controlled eyes, observant hands. He wasn't campaign staff. He was hunter, class, interesting. I continued walking normally, never acknowledged surveillance too early. Voss followed 3 blocks behind. Professional distance, no obvious mistakes. Most civilians never notice tails because they look for movie behavior. Newspapers, sunglasses, awkward hiding. Real surveillance feels natural. That's why it works. I crossed Wisconsin Avenue, entered a crowded cafe, exited through the side corridor, and paused briefly near reflective glass. Voss adjusted instantly. Good reflexes. Definitely experienced. I continued the route for another 20 minutes, slowly escalating counter-surveillance patterns. He stayed with me, not aggressively, cautiously. That meant Garrett still viewed me as uncertainty, not confirmed threat. Good. At DuPont Circle Station, I descended into the metro. Voss followed. Poor choice. Underground systems favor experienced operators. I boarded a train at the last possible second. Voss made it through the doors barely in time. Now I knew he was committed. I stood calmly near the center pole while commuters filled the car around us. Then I looked directly at him for the first time. Recognition flickered instantly across his face. Caught. Not because he'd been spotted, because he realized I had allowed it. I smiled slightly, just enough, then exited at the next stop as doors closed between us. Voss remained trapped aboard the departing train. Amateur mistake. Never enter controlled transit with someone whose background you don't fully understand. By the time he doubled back topside, I was already inside a secured underground parking structure 2 blocks away, watching him through remote camera feeds. Interesting man, capable, disciplined, but now emotionally activated. That would matter later. At 4:50 a.m. p.m., Elias sent another urgent transmission. You have a bigger problem. I opened the attachment and immediately felt the temperature inside my body drop. A classified archival request had been submitted through a Treasury-linked oversight channel referencing Budapest and Nathaniel Cross simultaneously. Someone important had noticed movement. Not Garrett, not Voss. Someone above them. Someone institutional. I stared at the screen carefully. This was becoming dangerous in ways Rebecca could never comprehend. Once governments start protecting themselves, morality disappears completely. I typed, "Who authorized?" Response, "Unknown." But they pulled sealed banking cooperation files. That meant old operations. European financial disruption programs, black channel leverage networks, things connected indirectly to me. My pulse slowed automatically. Training. When danger rises, emotion compresses. The room around me sharpened. Sounds became clearer. Breathing steadier. I opened Phoenix Protocol again, just in case, then stopped halfway through activation. Number not yet. I wasn't running. Not from Garrett Mills. Not from Daniel Voss. Not from ghosts buried 20 years earlier. At 7:30 a.m. that evening, Rebecca arrived unexpectedly at the townhouse again. This time she looked frightened, actually frightened. The moment I opened the door, she stepped inside quickly and locked it behind her. They're investigating Garrett. Yes, no. You don't understand. Federal investigators. I understand perfectly. Her eyes searched my face desperately. What did you do? Nothing yet. That terrified her more. What do you mean yet? I studied her carefully. Mascara slightly smeared. Hands trembling. Breathing shallow. Rebecca finally understood something fundamental. Garrett Mills was not protecting her. Powerful men rarely protect liabilities once exposure begins. They're blaming staff, she whispered. Of course they were. Containment always moves downward first. Assistants, consultants, advisors, spouses. Never principals, unless unavoidable. Did Garrett ask you to destroy anything? I asked quietly. She froze, and in that silence, I knew. Oh, Rebecca. Tears filled her eyes immediately. I didn't know what it was. You shredded documents? I thought they were donor drafts. Did you sign anything? Number good. At least Garrett wasn't completely reckless. Listen to me carefully, I said. She stepped closer instinctively. For one brief moment, she looked like my wife again, scared, lost, human. You need to separate yourself from Garrett publicly and immediately. I can't. Yes, you can. He'll destroy me. I looked directly into her eyes. No, I said softly. I will. The words hit her like physical force. She stepped backward slowly, and I hated myself a little for saying them. But truth matters, especially now. Nathan, she whispered. Who are you really? I stood silently for several seconds, then answered honestly for the first time in our marriage. I am the reason Garrett Mills became important. The color left her face completely. No. Yes. That's impossible. Nothing about your life happened accidentally, Rebecca. Tears rolled down her cheeks now. Not grief, horror, because she was finally beginning to understand the scale of her misunderstanding. The senator, the donors, the invitations, the promotions, the access, all of it existed inside architecture I quietly built around her, and she abandoned the architect for the decoration. Outside, thunder shook the townhouse windows. Inside, Rebecca stared at me like a stranger wearing her husband's face, and somewhere beneath Washington's glittering political machinery, the entire structure was beginning to crack open. Chapter 5. The hearing. The collapse began publicly on a Monday morning. At 6:12 a.m. M3 national news outlets released coordinated stories involving undisclosed donor pathways tied to Senator Garrett Mills' exploratory presidential apparatus. At 6:47 a.m., cable news shifted from cautious speculation to active scandal coverage. By 7:30 a.m., ethics commentators were openly discussing criminal exposure, and by 8:05 a.m., Garrett stopped answering Rebecca's calls. That detail mattered more than the headlines. Power reveals itself most honestly during abandonment. I sat in the hidden room, watching the media storm unfold across 6 monitors while analysts, anchors, and political operatives tried desperately to explain a machine they did not yet fully understand. They thought this was about campaign finance violations. It wasn't. That was merely the visible infection. The real disease was dependency. Garrett Mills had built his entire rise atop invisible support structures he never bothered to identify because ambition made him arrogant. He believed momentum belonged to him personally. He never understood he was being carried, and now the people carrying him were quietly letting go. At 8:14 a.m. Elias sent a simple message. They're turning on each other. Of course they were. Political coalitions are not families. They are temporary survival agreements. Once exposure begins, loyalty becomes a liability. I opened the live feed from a private donor call intercepted through one of my older financial access channels. Garrett's campaign chairman looked pale. 2 consultants were already discussing legal separation strategies. One donor threatened immediate withdrawal unless foreign exposure could be contained. Foreign exposure? Interesting phrasing. That meant they knew more than the public did. Good. Fear was spreading upward now. I leaned back slowly in my chair and listened to Garrett speaking somewhere off. Chimera. Find the leak. Not. Fix the corruption. Not. Protect the staff. Find the leak. Men always reveal priorities under pressure. At 9:22 a.m., Rebecca arrived at the townhouse carrying 2 suitcases and looking like someone escaping a war zone. I opened the door before she knocked. Her eyes were red from crying. Garrett had finally stopped pretending. He told me to stay invisible, she whispered immediately. Smart advice. He said investigators may contact me. They will. Nathan, her voice broke. I think he's sacrificing me. I studied her face quietly, and despite everything, part of me still hurt seeing her afraid. That was the cruelest aspect of love. Even damaged love leaves reflexes behind. You were always expendable to him, I said softly. That's not true. It is absolutely true. She stepped inside, setting the suitcases down shakily. I left everything for him. That wasn't correct. You left everything for ambition, I replied calmly. Garrett was simply the nearest vehicle. The words wounded her because they were true. Rebecca sat heavily on the couch and buried her face in her hands. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The townhouse felt haunted now, not by ghosts, by consequences. I need your help, she whispered finally. There it was, the sentence I knew would eventually come. Not, I am sorry. Not, I was wrong. Help. I walked slowly toward the kitchen and poured coffee while considering the woman who had detonated our marriage for proximity to power. What exactly do you think I can do? I asked. She looked up at me with trembling eyes. Everything. Silence settled heavily between us. Interesting. Rebecca finally understood, not fully, but enough. You know what the tragedy is, I said, quietly. What? If you had trusted me instead of judging me, you could have had every single thing you wanted without destroying yourself. Tears rolled down her face again. I didn't know. No, I agreed softly. You didn't. That almost broke me, because once upon a time, Rebecca truly had loved me. Not my influence, not my money, not my hidden networks. Me, the younger version of her, did anyway. Before Washington poisoned her perspective, before ambition became addiction, before she started mistaking visibility for value. My secure terminal chimed downstairs. Priority alert. I descended into the hidden room alone. The message waiting on screen came from Elias. Ethics committee moving faster than expected. Emergency hearing likely. Beneath it, and Voss found Budapest. I closed my eyes briefly. Damn, that mattered. Daniel Voss had reached farther than expected. Too far. I opened the attached intelligence scrape immediately. There it was. Nathaniel Cross, flagged inside a sealed Treasury Cooperation Annex connected to post-Belgrade stabilization financing. Not full exposure, but enough fragments to trigger institutional curiosity, and institutional curiosity kills people. I sat very still. For the first time in years, I seriously considered disappearing again. Phoenix Protocol remained open on the adjacent monitor. One activation sequence. That's all it would take. By sunrise tomorrow, Nathan Hale could vanish permanently. New identities, asset redistribution, dead communication channels. No digital continuity. Gone. I stared at the activation screen for nearly a minute, then slowly closed it. I was tired of running from ghosts, and perhaps even more importantly, I was tired of hiding from my own life. At noon, Daniel Voss called me directly. Interesting choice, I answered immediately. You are difficult to find, he said. No, I replied calmly. You are simply late. Small silence. Then, you know who I am, yes. And you know why I am calling. You found Budapest. Another silence, longer this time. When Voss finally spoke again, his voice had changed completely. No more campaign security posture. Now he sounded careful, respectful, dangerously curious. Who are you really? I looked at the encrypted file surrounding me, the hidden room, the operational archives, the decades of buried leverage, then answered honestly. A man your employer should have feared. You funded Mills. Partially. Why? That's a complicated question. Try me. I smiled faintly. Because I wanted to see whether power corrupts men faster than opportunity reveals them. And it does. Voss exhaled slowly. You understand there are agencies becoming interested in you now. Yes, you don't seem concerned. I've been concerning agencies since before you graduated college. That silenced him completely. Then, Jesus Christ. I almost felt sorry for him. Daniel Voss had started investigating a jealous husband. Instead, he found remnants of geopolitical architecture hidden beneath domestic betrayal. You should walk away from Garrett, I told him quietly. He's finished, isn't he? Yes. And Rebecca? That question lingered, painfully. She still has choices, I answered. Whether she deserved them remained unclear at 4:45 a.m. p.m. Senator Garrett Mills finally broke publicly. The emergency press conference aired live across every major network. He looked exhausted, sweating slightly, older somehow. Fear ages powerful men rapidly. These allegations are politically motivated lies, Garrett announced. I have done nothing improper. Lie again, mistake. Never repeat lies once evidence begins surfacing. Then came the question that shattered him. Senator, can you explain the Cayman donor routing tied to your senior aide Rebecca Hale? Rebecca gasped softly from upstairs, where she watched television alone. Garrett hesitated. Tiny pause. Tiny fatal pause. Then, Rebecca Hale acted independently in several administrative matters currently under review. There it was. Abandonment. Public abandonment. I closed my eyes briefly, while hearing Rebecca begin crying upstairs. Not because Garrett betrayed her, because she finally realized she had destroyed her marriage for a man who viewed her as disposable insulation. The hearing was scheduled 48 hours later. Emergency Senate Ethics Committee review. Nationally televised. Garrett tried negotiating privately first. Of course he did. 3 different intermediaries reached out within 12 hours offers. Warnings. Threats. Money. One message simply read, "Name your price." I deleted it without replying. Some things cannot be purchased once grief hardens into principle. The night before the hearing, Rebecca entered the hidden room for the first time. I hadn't invited her. She found the door partially open and stood frozen in silence. The monitors, the encrypted systems, the operational archives. Her entire understanding of our marriage collapsed visibly in real time. "Oh my God," she whispered. I turned slowly toward her. "Yes, what is all this?" "My real life." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "You lied to me for years. I protected you for years." "That's not the same thing." "No," I agreed quietly. "It isn't." She walked slowly around the room, staring at documents, maps, financial structures, and secure communications flowing across screens. Then she saw the net worth projection window accidentally left open on the side monitor. Her face went completely pale. "That can't be real." "It is." "How much?" "Enough." Rebecca looked physically ill, not from greed. From realization, the townhouse, the modest suits, the ordinary life. None of it had been limitation. It had been choice. "You let me believe we were average. I wanted a peaceful life." "And Garrett?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "You funded him? Indirectly?" "You made him powerful." "I gave him opportunity," I corrected softly. "He supplied the corruption himself." Rebecca stared at me for a very long time, then asked the question that mattered most. "Did you ever really love me?" That hurt, because despite everything, the answer remained yes. "I loved you enough to build an entire quieter life around you," I said softly. She broke completely then, sobbing openly. Not because of the money, not because of the scandal, because she finally understood what she actually destroyed. The next morning, the Senate ethics hearing began at 9 a.m. Garrett arrived flanked by attorneys and advisors. Rebecca arrived separately under media assault, and I did not arrive at all, at least not physically. At 9:47 a.m., after 2 hours of evasions and denials, the committee chairman announced a classified witness would testify remotely under federal protection protocols. Garrett looked irritated, then mildly concerned. Then the secure monitor activated, and my face appeared on screens across the chamber, older, calmer, shadowed deliberately by secure, light positioning. Rebecca stopped breathing. Garrett went white instantly. The chairman spoke carefully. "Please state your name for the record." I looked directly into the camera. "Nathaniel Cross, operational alias Nathan Hale." The room exploded, whispers shouting, confusion. Garrett stared at the screen like he'd seen a corpse sit upright, and for the first time since this began, I allowed him to understand exactly who he had betrayed. Not merely a husband, an architect, a ghost, a man who built systems powerful enough to elevate senators and patient enough to destroy them. The chairman called for order repeatedly while cameras flashed wildly. Then, he asked the final question. "Mr. Cross, did Senator Mills knowingly participate in illegal financial influence operations?" I looked directly at Garrett Mills. "The man who stole my wife, mocked my life, Used my networks. Discarded Rebecca. The instant danger appeared, and I answered calmly, yes. Garrett's entire political career died in the silence that followed. Chapter 6. Ashes and Quiet Water. Here is a strange silence that follows destruction. Not literal silence. The world keeps moving. News anchors keep talking. Markets keep opening. Cars keep honking through Washington traffic. But inside the people who survive scandal, something goes permanently quiet. I felt it 3 days after the hearing while standing alone on the deck of a private coastal property in Nova Scotia, watching gray water roll beneath a cold, morning sky. The wind smelled like salt and pine, no cameras, no politics, no encrypted terminals humming beneath floorboards, just ocean. I had forgotten what ordinary peace sounded like. Washington was still burning behind me. Of course, Senator Garrett Mills resigned 40 hours after my testimony, not gracefully. Men like Garrett never collapse gracefully. First came denial, then outrage, then victimhood. By the end, he was blaming political enemies, disloyal staff, manipulated records, foreign disinformation, even Rebecca herself, especially Rebecca. The Ethics Committee released partial financial findings within 72 hours. Enough to destroy him publicly without exposing the classified architecture beneath the scandal. That part mattered. There were truths, even governments preferred buried. Garrett became useful as a sacrifice. Once institutions choose a scapegoat, they protect themselves by feeding him to the public completely. Cable news called it the largest ethics implosion in modern Senate history. They weren't entirely wrong. 3 donor networks collapsed. 2 consulting firms dissolved overnight. Federal subpoenas multiplied across Washington like infection, and every single person involved suddenly pretended they barely knew Garrett Mills at all. That's power's favorite trick. Isolation after dependency. The man who spent years surrounded by admirers ended alone inside a legal fortress built from attorneys and panic. Rebecca called me from D.C. exactly once after the hearing. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Her voice sounded hollow, not crying anymore. Past crying. Nathan. I stared out across the Atlantic before responding. Yes. I saw the resignation statement. So did the rest of the country. Long silence. Then quietly, they froze everything. Whose everything? Mine. There it was, the Vienna clauses. The classified containment agreement Rebecca signed years earlier had triggered automatically once ethics violations intersected with foreign adjacent financial exposure. Asset review. Access suspension. Federal cooperation requirements. She never truly understood what she signed in Vienna. Most civilians don't read security agreements carefully when frightened. Back then, she trusted me completely. Funny how life works. I told you Garrett would destroy you, I said softly. No, she whispered. You destroyed us. That sentence lingered between us painfully, because there was truth inside it. Not full truth, but partial truth. I could have forgiven the affair perhaps, maybe, but not the contempt, not the years of quietly treating me like dead weight while benefiting from invisible protections she never valued. I gave you 16 years of loyalty, I said calmly. Garrett gave you 16 months of excitement. You chose excitement. She started crying softly again. I was stupid. Yes. I didn't understand who you were. No, I agreed quietly. You understood exactly who I pretended to be. Another silence. Wind rolled across the ocean outside my temporary retreat, while gulls drifted above dark water. Then Rebecca asked the question I knew had haunted her since the hearing. Did you ever intend to tell me the truth? I closed my eyes briefly. That answer hurt. Every year, I admitted softly, I kept thinking I would. And why didn't you? Because every time I came close, I saw how much you loved normal life. She laughed bitterly through tears. Normal? Normal. Nathan, you were secretly one of the most powerful men in Washington. No, I corrected gently, one of the most connected. Here is a difference. Power attracts attention. Connection survives attention. I loved you, she whispered suddenly. Past tense again, still painful. I know. No, she said shakily. You don't understand. I really did. I stared out at the cold Atlantic horizon for a very long time before answering. I know that too. And I did. That was the tragedy underneath everything. Rebecca's betrayal wasn't entirely fake. She had loved me once, but ambition eventually consumed the version of her capable of staying loyal to quiet things. We ended the call without goodbye. Some endings don't deserve ceremony. By the following week, Washington had fully shifted into feeding frenzy mode. Garrett's former allies testified against him publicly. Leaked emails surfaced daily. Political commentators dissected his downfall like vultures examining bones. And Rebecca became collateral, blacklisted from every serious campaign operation in the country. No committee wanted association with scandal contamination. No strategist trusted her. No donor wanted photographs beside her. Within 2 weeks, she went from rising national political figure to writing anonymous opinion pieces and scandal commentary for fringe political blogs under a pseudonym no one respected. I didn't enjoy watching it happen. That surprised me. For months, revenge had carried me forward like fuel, but once Garrett actually collapsed, once Rebecca lost everything, the satisfaction became strangely thin. People imagine revenge creates joy. It doesn't. It creates completion. Very different thing. At some point during destruction, you realize no punishment can fully reimburse emotional damage. It only balances accounts enough for breathing to become easier again. Daniel Voss visited me in Nova Scotia near the end of October. I knew he was coming hours before he arrived. Old habits. He stepped onto the deck wearing a charcoal coat against the ocean wind and looked around the property carefully before sitting across from me. No surveillance? He asked. I poured him coffee calmly. Not today. That's either reassuring or terrifying. Depends who you work for. He accepted the mug and stared at the water. You disappeared cleanly. Not entirely. No, he admitted, not entirely. Voss looked older now too. Scandal exhausts everyone nearby. The agencies backed off, he said eventually. I expected they would. They sealed most of the cross material permanently. Also expected. He studied me carefully. You could have destroyed far more people. Yes, but you didn't. Number. Why? I considered the question seriously, then answered honestly. Because revenge has to stop somewhere. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything else I'd done. After a while, Voss said quietly, Garrett still thinks you orchestrated everything years in advance. I smiled faintly. He gives me too much credit. Did you? Number not entirely anyway. The truth was messier. I built systems, influence channels, financial architecture, but human corruption supplied the collapse naturally. Garrett and Rebecca made their own choices. I simply removed the illusion of safety around those choices. Voss leaned back slowly. You know, he said, when I first investigated you, I thought you were some bitter husband trying to scare a politician. And now? He laughed softly. Now I think half the city accidentally lived inside your shadow for 20 years. Interesting phrasing, maybe true. Before leaving, Voss paused near the deck railing. Rebecca asked about you. That stirred something painful inside me despite everything. What did you tell her? That you finally looked tired. I nodded slowly. That's accurate. After he left, I remained outside until sunset. The ocean darkened gradually beneath fading gray skies, while cold wind rolled across the cliffs. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about the future instead of contingency planning. No operations, no leverage, no surveillance. Just life. My remaining fortune transferred quietly into global stabilization trusts, veteran rehabilitation programs, intelligence, family support foundations, and post-conflict recovery initiatives across regions most Americans would never think about. Money should move after you are done needing it. Otherwise, it becomes another prison. By December, Nathan Hale officially retired from government consulting entirely. No press release, no ceremony, just absence, exactly the way I preferred. The townhouse in Alexandria sold quietly 6 months later. I never went back inside after Rebecca left. Some structures carry too much memory to inhabit safely. As for Rebecca, I saw her one final time nearly a year after the hearing. Not planned, not dramatic. I was leaving a small bookstore in Boston during winter when I spotted her sitting alone inside a cafe across the street. Smaller somehow, not physically. spiritually. The sharp ambition that once radiated from her had burned away, leaving something quieter behind. Human again. She noticed me immediately through the glass. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she stood slowly and walked outside into the cold. Snow drifted softly around us while city traffic moved behind the silence. "You look peaceful," she said. "I am learning." She nodded faintly. "I read about your foundation work. Some of it. That was always the real you, wasn't it?" Interesting question. I considered it carefully. "No," I answered honestly. "All the versions were real." Tears gathered in her eyes, though she kept them controlled this time. "I loved the wrong version," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "You loved the visible version." That hurt her because she finally understood. She stepped closer. "I am sorry, Nathan. Not strategic, not frightened, not manipulative, real, and somehow that made it harder." "I know," I said quietly. Snow settled lightly on her dark coat while she searched my face for something that no longer existed. Hope maybe, or forgiveness large enough to rebuild the dead. But some things don't resurrect once trust collapses. "I think about Prague sometimes," she whispered. So did I. The chestnuts, the scarf, the winter stars, the version of us that might have survived in another life. "I do too," I admitted. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then she asked the final question. "Did revenge make you happy?" I looked past her toward the falling snow. "No," I answered truthfully. "It made me free." "And that was enough," she cried quietly then, not loudly, not dramatically, just the soft grief of someone finally understanding the true cost of confusing ambition with meaning. I touched her hand once, one final kindness. Then I walked away into the falling snow while the woman I once built an entire hidden life around disappeared, slowly behind me. The ocean waited, peace waited. A quieter future waited. And for the first time in decades, no one was hunting me anymore. The end.